topics, Joshua, that Commissioner Warren will certainly be asked about: the Big Ten's role in college football playoff expansion. Many have long believed that it was inevitable, and it appears to be coming, allowing more teams into the field. The field would include the 6 highest-ranked conference champs and the 6 highest-ranked non-champs. You're guaranteed to get in if you're a conference champion, but it opens the door for more highly ranked teams to be part of the playoff. Your initial thoughts on the expansion policy?
Yeah, I just felt like expansion was coming, and if there's a way that you want to incorporate as many teams as possible, I think in an equitable way, this makes a lot of sense. You know, you want to put the conference champs in there because I do think it means something to win a conference champ, but this also allows teams who maybe didn't get that conference championship but are really good football teams a chance into the field. Now, this is probably a harsh take overall, but I'm not exactly sure that there are 12 teams in any given college football season that can win the championship, but what you're going to get is a lot more excitement. We're going to talk about these matchups and these games that are built. We're going to talk about potentially the first round of games being played on campuses where a team from the South has to potentially go over to Madison, Wisconsin. Wouldn't that be a fun opportunity and a fun thing to talk about in college football? So as we kind of address this situation, I think it was coming. I like the way that it looks. There are some things I would change, but I don't get to make the rules. I'm excited overall.
Yeah, I think the counter, obviously, to your statement about 12 teams that really can't all win the championship. Hey, there are not 68 that can win the championship in NCAA basketball, and it is widely considered one of the greatest postseason tournaments in any sport run by any organization. I do think it's fascinating that they make sure the conference champions are still rewarded because, as you may have seen on that graphic, under that new policy, if you win your conference championship and you're one of the highest 4 ranked conference champions, you do get a first-round bye.
And the bye is really important, I think, for teams to be able to kind of rest and recoup. When you play that conference championship game, that is an extra game on your schedule. And you want to make sure that the players are rested. Those first-round games, it's definitely going to put the pressure on teams to really finish out that regular season instead of maybe saying we're going to rest our guys at one point or another. You want to make sure that you can make it all the way to the end as conference champs. Now, the one thing I will talk about just in terms of unintended consequences with this space is for a lot of teams, it's really important to make a bowl game, and it's a big deal for their program. And I would hate to see the value of making one of those lower-level bowl games go down because of this college football playoff expansion. So just one thing to think about there.
Now, interesting news coming out yesterday regarding Texas and Oklahoma and how it could potentially apply to the expansion of the college football playoff. Reports that both those schools have reached out to the SEC, interested in potentially leaving the Big 12 to join the SEC, which would give that league, if it were to happen, 16 teams. And you start to think about this expansion policy, and with 5 conference champs given those buys or given those bids into the playoff, you start to think about why those schools are already, before this policy is even implemented, considering jumping from one Power 5 conference to another.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a lot of positioning going on here. And I think the power balance, as we started to see with some of the things happening off the field, is definitely shifting. On the field, it's the same thing. So I'm very curious to see how all of this stuff plays out. It's very formative in the stages of its development, but definitely a curious happening in college football.
Now, Joshua, it's interesting when you ask players to play more games. It's happening, obviously, in the NFL with the expansion of the regular season, but then there was a counter. The preseason has been shortened. Mm-hmm. In college football now, you are potentially asking these student athletes, and I know the name, image, likeness, and they can make money now, and some people now consider them pseudo-professionals. You're asking these student athletes to play more football games. And many of these young men have aspirations of playing at the next level. And every game, as you know, every extra game that you play is wear and tear on your body. And I think that's a discussion that potentially needs to be had physically. How much does this affect these players?
No, I definitely agree with that. And if you're a player who wants to play professionally, you're going to have to get used to the increased workload. And that's just something that comes a part of the game. I think where it becomes a real issue for me is for players in the classroom in terms of making sure that they can take care of their academics. As you look at the football season, they basically start school while they're still in training camp. They go through the semester. If you make it to a conference championship game, you probably are playing that game during your finals week. And then you stay on campus when most of the other students get to leave. You get your bowl practices in. And then who knows, if you make it to the final round of this new expanded playoff, you could be in week 2 of your semester before the national championship game is played. And I think that's where it really becomes tough, is for college players to balance their lives out. In the NFL, you go to the facility, you get what you got to get in, and then you go home and you can relax and unwind and do those other things. As As a college player, you wake up early in the morning, you go work out, you go to practice, then you go back, you go to tutoring, you finish up your homework, and then it's 11 o'clock and you get to go to sleep. And that's the one thing I'm worried about, is that balance for athletes.
If this policy is implemented, as we showed on the graphic, and those 6 highest-ranked teams outside of the conference champs, regardless of affiliation, get into the playoff, who benefits the most? Is it teams like a Cincinnati of a year ago or Boise State of a decade ago? Do those teams benefit the most, or does this still more benefit these Power 5 powers like an Alabama or an Ohio State, which over the last couple of years would have enjoyed that first-round bye in this new playoff system?
I think it does a little bit of everything, and that's kind of the genius of this system in my mind, is those Power 5 teams that we've talked about all have a legitimate shot to get in and to prove to the nation what they think they are. I think the top teams that we've seen, the Alabamas, the Ohio States, the Clemsons, the Oklahomas, are going to be in year in and year out, and they're probably going to end up getting that first-round bye too, so it's a definite benefit for them. But here is where it kind of bridges that gap, is the teams like Penn State, who have been really close, or Wisconsin, who have been really close, Minnesota, as we've seen. Some of those teams are going to have their legit shot to get in there too. It wouldn't be a surprise to see 2 Big Ten teams every year, possibly 3 every single year in this expanded playoff format.
Yeah, I think, to me, one of the elements of this playoff that I like the most is the fact that it does not limit a conference. With 12 teams, if a conference has 5 that are worthy of qualification, and that is obviously going to the extreme, then those 5 get a chance to play. And if you feel and prove on the field that you are one of the 12 best, you should get a chance to play regardless of what conference you play in.
Yeah, I agree with that, and that's the way that it should be. And that's why the expanded field, having 6 kind of at-large spots for the highest-ranked teams, is what makes a lot of sense to me, because you get the best teams in there regardless of the status of a conference championship. Those teams get to play as well.